Well, hello, I'm Joanna with Blissful Baby Sleep Coaching, and I'm here to talk to you about early rising, which I know is the hardest. So the way I define early rising is if a child is waking between 4 and 6 a.m. and they are awake and they either have a really hard time going back to sleep or they need a lot of support from you going back to sleep, or worse, they are like awake and ready to start their day. Typically, early rising is triggered by this fall time change we just had, which is why I want to speak to you about this today so that you can understand what the triggers are for early rising and also some recommendations on how to solve it. I will let you know that early rising is very tricky and can take a long time to actually resolve itself. So if your child is having wakings between 4 and 6 a.m., I am going to give you all these recommendations, but I need you to be very patient with the process because it can take 3 or 4 weeks for it to go away. If you believe that the early rising event has actually been caused from the fall time change, one of the best ways that you can kind of help move it back to the way it was to make sure your child gets exposed to morning sunlight before 10 a.m. and definitely for 20 minutes or more. That will help them link up for the circadian rhythm. Now, that is for individuals who have never had previous early rising and they think that the fall time change is the thing that just kind of tweaked the child's sleep schedule. However, for those of you that have had other background with early rising, or every single time there's a time change, the early rising happens, then the rest of these recommendations are going to be very relevant for you. So definitely take notes, or you can listen to this video over and over again. Okay, so as we define early rising, waking or having a hard time going back to sleep somewhere between 4 and 6 a.m. There are 3 daytime triggers that will always cause early rising to happen, or unfortunately perpetuate the early rising behavior going forward. Okay, so the first trigger is if your child does not get the right amount of daytime sleep for their age and stage. This is what I call filling the sleep tank. So at each age and stage, there is a certain amount of daytime sleep the child needs. If the child is consistently under that daytime sleep expectation, it absolutely will trigger early rising behavior. Okay. Second trigger is that the interval between afternoon nap and the child falling asleep at bedtime, if that interval is too long, that will also trigger early rising. The third is if at the onset of sleep at bedtime, your child is either too drowsy or worse, they're completely conked out in your arms before you transfer them to the crib, that will also trigger early rising. And I know that's like the saddest one, right? Because we love the idea of like our child falling asleep on our arms, or having the child get really drowsy and then being able to have a successful transfer to the crib, or the big girl bed or big boy bed. But that is actually a huge trigger for early rising behavior. So the first thing to do is, if you're having early rising, is to ask yourself, am I by accident triggering or perpetuating the early rising behavior because I have one or all of these 3 daytime triggers? All it takes is one trigger to start it. And remember, once early rising starts, it's very stubborn and it takes on a life of its own. And the only way you can get out of the loop of early rising is to attend to the daytime triggers and eliminate those daytime triggers. And then the secondary thing you have to do is become consistent on how you respond to the child when the early rising event happens. So now let's move into what you do when the early rising event actually happens. Okay, so there you are, somewhere between 4 and 6 a.m. your child wakes. The most important thing you can do is make sure you keep the room dark and your child preferably in their crib or bed, and not let them get out of the bed until at least 6 a.m. The reason why we have to do that is that oftentimes children will fall back asleep. And if we get them out of the crib or their bed before 6 a.m., then we've eliminated that opportunity for them to learn how to go back to sleep. Okay. So that's number one. Also, if they're waking between 4 and 6 a.m. and they had not been previously eating or drinking, please do not then add that in, because if by accident you had a child that was not previously eating or needing a feeding or anything like that between 4 and 6 a.m., and all of a sudden you randomly start feeding them at like 5:15 or 5:30 in the morning, then you will actually perpetuate your child continuously waking at that time, because now the body's been trained to expect calories at that time. Now, the reason why I was laughing is because I've done it. Okay. So this is why early rising is, I can feel so exact about it. And I can also laugh about it because I have been with my own child in early rising drama many, many times in her childhood. So I have made all of these mistakes and have had to go back and reevaluate and correct and make changes time and time again. So if it's happening to you, it's okay. It's all solvable. You have to have a little bit of humor and also a little bit of discipline on putting together these recommendations. So again, if it happens, got to keep them in the room until 6 a.m. Don't expose them to light or food before 6 a.m. Second thing you need to do is, when you are willing to let them get up for the day, you want to create a pattern or a routine so that the child then knows it's time to get out of the room. So you want to, maybe turn on the light or open the shades or say a bright, happy good morning. You want to just create some kind of pattern and routine so that it signals to the child that it's actually time to get out of the room. If we get into the habit of going into the room and rescuing the child out of darkness after an early rising event, we can by accident perpetuate the early rising, because the child never has like a definitive understanding of when the night ends. That's why we need a routine to signal, like the lights go on, the shades go up, I say good morning, and then I get you out of the room. Okay. So that's really, it's very subtle, but it really ultimately does make a huge difference. You just have to recognize most children operate in the world of patterns. And so the more consistent with our pattern and our routines, the easier the child can interpret what it is that you desire from them. Okay, so if you're like Joanna, I have, attended to the daytime triggers. I've been very careful how I attend to the child in the middle of the night. It's still not gone. What does that mean? Okay, what that might mean is that your child has developed sleep crutches during that time frame. And what I mean by that is, a sleep crutch is defined as anything that has to be done to or for the child in order to go to sleep or go back to sleep. Sleep crutches can be beautiful and helpful and wonderful until all of a sudden they become a burden. And so a lot of times, if a child has sleep crutches at the onset of sleep at bedtime, they typically will want some version of that support at every arousal all night. And if previously they did not need support between 4 and 6 a.m., and then they got an early rising trigger, then they're going to want the same help you gave them at bedtime. They're going to want that at that 4 to 6 a.m. hour. Now, there's another option that you have no sleep crutches at all, meaning your child goes to sleep by themselves independently at bedtime and they sleep peacefully up until that 4 to 6 a.m. hour. And then you found that you've kind of gotten into the habit of coming in and patting them back to sleep or laying down with them or holding their hand, and you've, done something to help them go back to sleep, then you've actually by accident inserted a sleep crutch. And once a sleep crutch gets inserted, that will actually perpetuate the behavior, because the child actually literally forgets how to go back to sleep themselves. And they want the fastest, easiest route, which is, of course, a parent coming in and doing something to and for them. So oftentimes you might have to do a little bit of light sleep training around that arousal. And then the child regains those independent sleep skills. But if you are in a situation where you had a child that has always needed help at the onset of sleep, and now they need a ton of help at the early rising event, then that really is a signal to you that your child is really ready for independent sleep skills, and that you might want to consider doing some formal, thorough, methodical sleep coaching for your child so that they can actually learn their 3 sleep skills, which is self-regulation, self-settling, and self-soothing at the onset of sleep, so they can begin to use those same skills at each arousal cycle all night, including the early rising. So I'm hoping that all of that made sense. I know it's a lot of information, and that is what makes early rising so tricky. There's many triggers, there's many things that you have to do to not perpetuate it, and there's many avenues that you have to take in order to make sure that you have not created a sleep crutch during the time that the early rising behavior was around. But the good news is all of it is easy to solve if you are strategic, conscientious, and consistent over the course of several weeks. And then that child will consolidate those arousals. Now, if you need help, if you're like, Joanna, this video is awesome, but oh my God, I still don't know what to do. I need somebody to walk me day by day and step by step, because this child is confusing me, or me and my husband are getting in fights on how to handle it, or I'm just too tired to do this on my own. I need someone to help me. Then absolutely, I'm here to help. Okay. We can actually do like a sleep triage session where I spend an hour with you and your partner. You fill out a form in advance so that I get all the background material in your child, so that I can come to the conversation prepared to give you really good insight, perspective, and action steps to resolve it. So there's always help to be had. There's always hope to be had. I've been doing this for 12 years. I have absolutely seen your situation before, because not only have I lived it myself as a parent, but I've been helping parents for the last 12 years with these types of problems. And I'm totally here and available to help you. So just use the link below and you can schedule time with me. But happy fall, and know that early rising can be easily managed. Thank you for listening. Take care.